Renegades ability changes coming next week. Massive buffs to all three classes, in particular Hunters, and there's more on the way. Bungie is finally cooking some things up that players can get excited about. Let's take a look at all these changes. So the combat team has the final Sandbox tuning preview article for Renegades. The last couple of weeks we talked about weapons and armor, and this one's all focused on the abilities, which I'm sure most of you will enjoy, specifically buffing player abilities. Let's first start with the Hunters. After last week's armor preview, things were looking kinda rough, but we got some big improvements. Hunters have the most ability changes coming in Renegades, with more on the way in future releases. So let's first start with the Solar Gunslinger. These changes are primarily focused on making gunslinger damage more impressive. Gunslingers typically need to be precise with their abilities, so they deserve a devastating payoff when they hit their mark. For Golden Gun, Deadshot, and Six Shooter, increase damage against non-boss combatants by 15%, and increase damage against bosses by 26%. Golden Gun projectiles now scorch targets, 40 stacks base, plus 10 with increased stacks fragment. And when fired inside a well of radiance, Golden Gun now counts as radiant for increased damage, which is huge. For the Blade Barrage super, they increase damage against combatants 39%. For knives, Proximity Explosive Knife, Weighted Knife, Lightweight, and Knife Trick. Damage increase against red bar enemies by 50%, and increased damage against all other enemies by 36%. For the lightweights, the crit multiplier has been increased. For Acrobat's Dodge, the class ability, increased passive energy regen rate in PvE by 112%. And for the Gunpowder Gamble aspect, shooting the dynamite in midair now increases damage by 50%, 5 in PvP. Expands the radius, and creates sub-munitions. The changes to Nightstalker in this release are mostly centered on the Shadow Shot supers. Bungie wants Deadfall to be the best choice for weakening beefy targets, while making Mobius Quiver a top-tier damage choice. So for Shadow Shot Deadfall the super, Tether Source now attaches to combatants on direct impact. Increased weaken effect from 30 to 35%, and now immediately weakens and suppresses enemies in an area of effect on impact. For Shadow Shot Mobius Quiver super, while the super is active, dealing damage now increases the power of subsequent Shadow Shot attacks and bow weapons. This puts a bar on your screen that charges as you deal damage. When charged, your final shot, or final 2 shots with Orpheus Rig, deals significantly increased damage, turning it into one of the highest damage supers in the game, 227% max. There's an increased base super duration from 10 to 16 seconds, an increased duration with Orpheus Rig from 16 to 20. And lastly, for the Smoke Bomb melee, they increase the projectile lifetime after sticking to a surface from 3 seconds to 9. Reduce the lingering smoke time in PvP from 5 to 2 seconds, reduce screen effect intensity and duration while in enemy smoke, and reduce damage against players by 16%. The Arc Strider changes are light this time around. Moving forward, they'll be looking for more opportunities to diversify the number of Arc Strider builds that feel powerful in endgame content. So Storm's Edge passive energy regeneration increased by 25%, and Tempest Strike reduced damage against players by 16%. There's 2 changes for Stasis Revenant. For the Shatter Dive aspect, shattering stasis crystals or enemies now grants frost armor. And for Silence and Squall, increased damage against combatants by 63%. The Threadrunner changes are focused on increasing team play potential with Widow's Silk and making Silk Strike more durable. For the Widow's Silk aspect, looking at a grapple tangle for a short time now overrides your grenade ability with a free non-offensive grapple. Grapple tangles created near the ground now rise into the air shortly after creation. Grapple tangle base lifetime increased from 15 to 20 seconds, and hitting an enemy with a grapple melee that wasn't free now creates a grapple tangle. And for the Silk Strike Super, increased passive energy regeneration by 11% and damage resistance during Super by 13%. There's also a couple of changes for all Hunter subclasses. Marksman Dodge, the class ability, increased ammo pickup radius from 10 to 15 meters. And Gambler's Dodge in PvP only reduced melee energy gain from 50 to 35%. Now let's talk about the Warlocks, starting with Solar Dawnblade. The Warlock's Dawnblade changes are focused on Daybreak. They talked a little bit about this last week in the armor tuning preview. But increased damage against combatants by 20%, and projectiles now scorch enemies by default. For Voidwalker Nova Warp Super, charging the primary attack now pulls enemies toward the Warlock. Increased primary attack damage against combatants by 15%. And Dark Blink now releases weakening Seekers. And then for Nova Bomb Vortex now repeatedly pulls enemies toward it during its lifetime. Stormcaller changes are focused on making Stormcaller's super damage more competitive. So Storm Trance increased maximum sustained damage bonus from 50 to 65. Increased landfall jolt duration from 10 to 16. Chaos Reach has increased damage against combatants 20%. Ionic Sentry no longer blinds the user on creation. The Prismatic Aspect only reduced damage against players by 16%. For Stasis Shadebinder, Winter's Wrath has never been about the damage until now. They've increased Shatter Wave damage against frozen targets by 210%. And for the Frost Pulse class ability, reduced player freeze radius from 7.5 meters to 5, and now slows players between 5 and 8 meters. For Strand Broodweaver, there's just one change to the Needle Storm Super. Needles now prioritize bosses, mini-bosses, and champions over other enemies, which is nice. Get some of those beefier targets. And like Hunters, there's all Warlock subclass changes too. First, with the Healing Rift and Empowering Rift, rifts can now be cast while moving at roughly half speed. They increased the rift radius from 3.75 meters to 5. Empowering Rift increased melee and grenade recharge rate while standing in Empowering Rift by 20%. And for healing in PvP only, reduced healing rate by 10%. And lastly, we come to the Titan class, first starting with the Solar Sunbreaker. Bungie wants to incentivize hammer throw skill shots, so the ability now does bonus damage at range. For Void Sentinel, starting with the Sentinel Shield Super. Standing behind the shield now periodically reloads all weapons every 2.5 seconds. Now grants Void Overshield to allies behind the shield. Damage bonus while behind the shield has been reduced from 40 to 25%. Blocking attacks now extends super lifetime. And blocking attacks and protecting allies now charges shield throw damage. Arc Striker has one change to Fist of Havoc. Light attacks now increase the next heavy attack's damage. Stasis Behemoth Howl of the Storm aspect, when used during Super, increased super energy cost from 5 to 15%. And for Strand Berserker, the Banner of War aspect, melee damage bonus against players now scales with stacks instead of always being at full strength. And then we have some general abilities overall. Suppressor Grenades no longer suppresses the user and increased detonation damage by 10%. Spike Grenade now attaches to combatants. Void Fragments reduce the negative stat on Echo of Undermining from 20 to 10. Echo of Provision now grants plus 10 grenade stat. Echo of Exchange now gives plus 10 melee. and they've removed negative stats from all other fragments except Echo of Starvation and Echo of Persistence. Invisibility has updated visuals to be slightly more visible in Crucible. And Overshield, enemy VFX, now scales with the Overshield's remaining health. Arc Lightning Grenades now attaches to combatants, and Flashbang Grenade no longer blinds the user, increased detonation by 10%. For Strand Threadlings, Threadlings that lose their target before impact will land and look for another combatant instead of exploding. But anyway, Guardians, there you have a big list of changes for the abilities coming to Renegades. Let me know what you're most excited to see in the comments down below. And if you'd like to see some more Destiny news, lore, and mysteries just like this video, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next video.